Good morning, everyone, and welcome to EU Deal After Brexit. Today, we talk about the land borders of the UK with EU member states. First, we're going to talk about a significant piece of land which has been underestimated in the Brexit saga. Gibraltar is located at the south of Spain and has been a British overseas territory since the Treaty of Utrecht in the 18th century. Gibraltar, also called the Rock, includes one single border with Spain and includes 35,000 inhabitants. I am joined today by Candice and Doriane, two legal experts on Gibraltar who have been focusing their work on the fate of the Rock after Brexit. Hello, Candice. Hello, Doriane.
Hello.
What can you tell us today about the current legal status of Gibraltar?
Gibraltar possesses an atypical juridical status. Gibraltar is submitted to the British authority as it is one of the 14 British overseas territory. It is self-governing in all matters except defense, and it has its own constitution, parliament, and governor. The question of Gibraltar's sovereignty is the subject of an historical dispute with Spain, but the Gibraltarians are very attached to the British Crown.
So at the international level, Gibraltar has been recognized by the United Nations as a non-self-governing territory with a right to self-determination. Within the European Union, its membership was evidently attached to that of the UK since 1973, as enshrined in Article 355, paragraph 3 of the TFEU. Gibraltar had a special legal status within the Union as it was excluded from the Schengen area, the customs union, and the value-added tax zone. It was responsible for the transposition of EU law within its territory, and Gibraltarians benefited from a full British and European citizenship.
But how did Gibraltar prepare for the effects of Brexit and a potential hard Brexit?
Since the early days of Brexit, Gibraltarians have been expressing their formal opposition to Brexit with a 96% vote against it in the referendum. Ever since, the government has been preparing for every possible outcome of Brexit and the consequences within its territory, its relationship with Spain, and with the European Union.
Through the Brexit process, the fate of Gibraltar has always remained separate from the main negotiations. The EU set the focus on bilateral negotiations between Spain and the United Kingdom. Memoranda of understanding were signed in November 2018 by the UK, Gibraltar and Spain, focusing on the main important consequences.
The main consequences for Gibraltar will concern workers and persons crossing the border daily and the economy of the territory that relies mostly on financial services and the gambling industry.
We'll therefore start developing on this point with first focusing on workers' rights in Gibraltar after Brexit. I understand that Gibraltar receives many workers and tourists from Spain. What is the current protection they have in Gibraltar and what will it be after Brexit?
So one of the most feared consequences of Brexit on Gibraltar is the way it could affect the 15,300 workers, 50% of them being from Spain, and 40% of the total working force in Gibraltar crossing daily the border between La Linea and Gibraltar. At the present time, citizens very occasionally have to scan their passport, ensuring a constant flow of people. When it comes to employees, they are currently protected on both sides by 3 documents emanating from EU legislation. EU law guarantees for workers to be allowed to request to their employer to provide information and consult them on issues affecting them across 2 or more member states of the European Union and the European Economic Area.
Spain has made provisions for British citizens and economic operators based in Gibraltar in its unilateral contingency measures. Also, professional qualifications obtained in the United Kingdom by British and Spanish nationals who were in Spain before Brexit continue to be recognized. As for rights granted to citizens and workers, the EU law continues to be applied to EU citizens residing in Gibraltar. Procedures of recognitions of rights and benefits to workers and frontier workers are facilitated by states. Additionally, a joint coordinating committee led by both the UK and Spain has been established to oversee the implementation of the withdrawal agreement. The expert estimated the impact of a hard border as tremendous for the economy of both territories. Indeed, it could lead to delusional delays for people crossing the fence daily.
Thank you very much for this information. The second point, the second main focus, appears to be set on financial services. So what will happen in that sector?
In the area of financial services, Gibraltar Financial Services Commission has been empowered to fill in any deficiencies resulting from the UK legislation. The Commission can enact a statutory instrument, also called onshoring, for financial services legislation.
Firms that will suffer the most from Brexit will be those operating between Gibraltar and countries from the European Union and the European Economic Area. Most of them function through the exercise of passporting rights, allowing firms to trade freely within any other member state without requiring any additional authorization. Therefore, throughout the negotiation, the key factor for firms and the Gibraltar Financial Services Commission will be to cooperate closely.
So, as you previously mentioned, Candice, a large part of Gibraltar's economy relies on the presence of gambling companies on its territory. How does Brexit impact this important industry for Gibraltar?
Yes, the gambling industry represents 25% of Gibraltar's gross domestic product, with more than 30 companies as it benefits from the lowest taxation system in place for the industry. This regime does not necessarily change with Brexit. However, companies and consumers will stop being protected by EU regulations and restrictions regarding money laundering.
To fill any gaps in the legislation, the Chief Minister of Gibraltar and the Gambling Commission of the United Kingdom signed a Memorandum of Understanding on cooperation between gambling operators in Great Britain and Gibraltar. However, a few companies have already left the territory in fear of changes in taxation that could tremendously increase.
Well, thank you, Candice and Doriane, for providing us such important information on Gibraltar.
Thank you.
We'll now switch.
Hello, Marie.
Good morning.
We are now receiving Mary Basso and Benjamin Reinecker on the situation at the Northern Irish border and the British sovereign base areas in Cyprus. Welcome, Mary.
Welcome. Good morning.
Mary, could you explain to us what are the British sovereign bases area in Cyprus?
Of course. So there are two British sovereign base areas in Cyprus called Akrotiri and Dekelia. Cyprus was a former colony of the UK, and Akrotiri and Dekelia remained under British sovereignty even after the 1960 Treaty of Establishment for Cyprus independence. So both of these bases have British overseas territory status, like 14 other territories all around the world, like the Cayman Islands or Gibraltar. Those sovereign base areas include military bases, installations, and welcome many Cypriots who work there. In 2016, nearly 40,500 Cypriots people lived there, including 9,000 Cypriots and approximately 5,000 people working for the UK government. Akrotiri and Dekelia are not just airfields and harbours, but can be more considered as small towns, including factories, schools, and even agricultural fields.
Thank you for this information, Mary. Now, Benjamin, could you explain to us the situation in Northern Ireland?
Of course, as you all know, Northern Ireland is the part of the UK which is located on the island of Ireland. Both the UK and Ireland have since 1922 operated a common travel area. However, as you all know, there were tensions that followed the partition of Ireland and also an introduction of different custom rules. Therefore, the border became a tangible barrier to cross-border social and economic cooperation. Furthermore, because of the tensions in Northern Ireland, the border was closely monitored, with over 200 cross-border roads barricaded by the British military and large-scale military posts on the main official crossing points. Even following the implementation of the EU single market from 1992, which removed customs posts, the security installations on the border were a significant barrier to cross-border trade. It was not before the signing of the Good Friday Agreement in 1998 that the British Army security installations were gradually removed, and that a few years later there was finally an open border on the island of Ireland. And this open border is threatened by the Brexit process.
So if I understand correctly, the future of both these territories will be affected by Brexit because of their land borders. Could you provide us with more details on the effects of Brexit to those territories?
Of course, regarding Northern Ireland, there are two main facts which Brexit will affect Northern Ireland. First, the open border. The open border, which is the execution of the Good Friday Agreement, is essential to the peace in Northern Ireland. Secondly, Northern Ireland also relies a lot on the UK as a whole and the EU for its economy. A hard Brexit and a hard border would therefore greatly impact life in Northern Ireland. There is a need to preserve this open border.
So Brexit will have an impact on the daily life of the thousands of Cypriots who live and work there. It could affect both freedom of goods and freedom of workers in terms of visas or custom duties. Negotiations on Brexit are crucial in order to find a solution allowing those workers to keep their job without paying a large amount of taxes. If no deal is found, it could cause great disruption in the everyday life of about 16,000 individuals who live there nowadays.
So, such as Northern Ireland, the problem lies in the eventual operation of a hard border between Akrotiri and Decalia and the rest of Cyprus.
Yes. Interestingly, the British government had decided to keep Akrotiri and Decalia outside EU jurisdiction when Cyprus joined the EU back in 2004. However, the UK accepted the application of several unions provision in regard to taxation, custom duties, common commercial policy, and even agricultural policy. The operation of a hard border on the island of Cyprus would prevent Cypriots who work and or live there from benefiting from those provisions.
So what were the EU's and the UK's approaches to resolving these important issues?
Well, in regard to Northern Ireland, the British government's negotiating strategy first seemed to rely on the fact that they did not accept that there was a threat to the peace process, and that the EU as a whole would rather prioritize achieving a trade deal with the EU rather than support the Irish government in its interests and its concerns regarding the Northern Irish border. However, it was not the case in the end, as the EU stood by the Irish government and committed to ensure the survival of the Good Friday Agreement. The disagreements on the form and the shape of the border should have, in fact, summarized all the different wishes of the parties in terms of what kind of relationship do they wish with first Northern Ireland, Ireland and the UK.
Following the situation on Cyprus, well, Theresa May announced back in October 2018 that a Cypriot protocol had been agreed. Both the UK and the EU committed to establishing appropriate arrangements for the sovereign base areas, in particular with the aim to protect the interests of Cypriots who live and work there following the UK's withdrawal from the Union.
And did the UK and the EU manage to avoid a hard border on both the islands of Ireland and Cyprus?
Well, at least temporarily. The EU and the UK finally reached on 17th October 2019 a new settlement formed of an updated version of the first withdrawal agreement and political declaration of 2018. In this withdrawal agreement, the protocol in Northern Ireland changed drastically. The UK's government succeeded first in removing the backstop and secured its ability to diverge from EU standards and pursue an independent trade policy by putting down a trade barrier in the Irish Sea. So, in fact, there will be a customs border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, but the goods will not be checked on that border. In fact, the actual checks would be on what is effectively a customs border between Great Britain and the island of Ireland as a whole, with goods being checked at points of entry. Taxes will only have to be paid on goods being moved from Great Britain to Northern Ireland, only if they have a risk to enter the Republic of Ireland.
the EU and the UK have agreed on the terms of the protocol that I mentioned earlier, which is annexed to the withdrawal agreement. The aim of this protocol is to ensure that EU law will continue to apply in those bases, with no disruption or loss of rights, especially for the Cypriots who live and work there. This applies to a number of policy areas such as taxation, goods, agriculture, fisheries, and veterinary, and even phytosanitary rules. The protocol confers responsibility on Cyprus for the implementation and enforcement of EU law in relation to most of the areas covered, except for military affairs and security. Moreover, a specialized committee is also being established in order to oversee the application of this protocol.
So to conclude on the fact on Northern Ireland as a whole, well, the fate of the border is yet to be decided. The new protocol sets out a transitional period of 1 year, but at the end of this year, 31st December 2020, the problem will rise anew with the expiration of the withdrawal agreements, and so there is still a risk for a hard border on the island of Ireland, and it all depends on the UK and the EU finding a deal in the year 2020.
Yeah, the same goes for the military bases on Cyprus. The protocol is annexed to the withdrawal agreement, but what will happen when the transition period ends alongside with this agreement? So stay tuned for the future of the EU-UK relations that will get clearer by the end of the year.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Benjamin. And thank you all for watching.
Bye.